What's up, guys? Welcome back to DCS World, and welcome back to the tutorial series for the A-18C Hornet by Eagle Dynamics. In our last video, we learned how to start this bird up, and in this video, we're going to learn how to taxi and take off. Not a whole lot to it, just a few things to keep in mind. One of the first things we need to do is disengage our parking brake, which is this little yellow football-shaped lever here. Just click it and then it'll go away. I've also got my controls indicator on here so that you can see what my controls are doing. As you can see, I've got rudder pedals and brakes and stick that we're all going to be using for the taxi and takeoff procedure here. So to get this thing moving, we need to give it a little bit of throttle. So I'm going to bring the throttles forward just a little bit. I'm a little heavy, and you can see we're rolling forward. We want to make sure our nose wheel steering is on, and it usually is on by default. You can see nose wheel steering is on based on the NWS symbology on the HUD. If your nose wheel steering was off, for example, like that, you would press the undesignate / nose wheel steering paddle switch button on either your HOTAS or the keyboard, whatever the bind you have set up for that is, and that will engage nose wheel steering. And with nose wheel steering, if I just get rolling again here, that enables me to use my rudder pedals, as you can see on the floor there and on the controls indicator, to allow me to steer left and right on the ground. Now, one little neat function about nose wheel steering in the Hornet, because this is a carrier-capable jet, it's going to need to taxi in very tight spaces. So there is a mode of the nose wheel steering called high gain, or nose wheel steering high. If you press and hold your nose wheel steering button like this, you see on the HUD that it now says nose wheel steering high. And what that enables us to do is turn very tightly. So normally this is full left rudder, and I'm turning about this tightly, which isn't bad for a field. I can turn back towards the right. However, if I engage nose wheel steering high, I now can swing my nose around very tightly. Almost turning on a dime here for the most part. And swing back the other way. And that enables us basically to move around in tight spaces, especially on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So really good to keep in mind. Now, as far as just taxiing in general, you'll not want to give it too much throttle. You don't want to be moving too fast on the taxiways and the tarmacs. Generally, a good brisk walking pace is a good taxiing speed, so right about here. Maybe about, if you want an indication on your RPM gauge, no higher than 70-75% RPM while you're on the ground. You might need more or less power to get moving on the ground depending on how heavy you are. I've got external fuel tanks on my aircraft right now, so I'm a bit heavy. So I need a little bit more power to get moving. But the real trick to taxiing this aircraft is just keep your inputs nice and smooth. You don't want to give it full throttle. Especially the system will yell at you because you're not configured for takeoff and all of that. And we'll just follow the taxiway lines here out to the runway here at Abu Dhabi International Airport on the Persian Gulf map. Just staying nicely aligned with the taxiway center line here, more or less. You don't have to be absolutely perfect. Quick brake test to make sure our brakes work. Toe brakes come to a nice stop. And we can get moving again. And as we taxi up to the hold short line, we'll come to a stop here using our brakes once again. And we'll do a quick little pre-takeoff checklist. So a couple of things we want to do is we want to first set our flaps to half with either this switch here. We can click it once to half, or you can use a button on your HOTAS like I do to set it to half. we'll want to make sure our trim is set for takeoff. So if we look at our FCS page here, and by the way, if you need to get to your FCS page, you go to Menu. You want to get to the support page, so Menu again, and then FCS on the right side DDI. And you want to see that your stab, your stabilizers, or stabilators technically, are 12 degrees up. And we do that as part of the cold start procedure, but if you haven't, takeoff trim is the button in the center of the rudder trim wheel here. Press and hold that for about a second. That should set your trim for takeoff. Flap set to half as I mentioned. We'll just do a quick controls check. Looking left, looking right, left and right on the stick. Make sure our ailerons and stabilizers, elevators go up and down. Make sure our rudder works. And we are pretty much good to go, so we can taxi forward now onto the runway. I do love the Persian Gulf map. It's a desert, but it's a beautiful desert. Anyway, we'll make a right turn here to line up on the runway. This is runway 31 right at Abu Dhabi International Airport. Just following the taxiway lines right onto the runway center line. Get lined up on the center line pretty well here. And apply the brakes, come to a stop. Quick cross check. What I like to do on my left side DDI is I will go to the support page, back over to the TAC page if you're not there, and I will bring up the HUD repeater here. I will also keep the FCS page up on the right, just to keep an eye on things as we're taking off. So takeoff in the Hornet is pretty easy. Essentially, you're going to flick the throttles to full afterburner, and if your takeoff trim and flaps are set correctly, the Hornet will effectively just take off on its own. With the takeoff trim, you almost don't need to rotate it. However, given our current weight, we're going to give a little bit of backstick at around 140-ish knots or so. You don't have to be exactly precise, but a little bit of backstick at 140-ish knots. We're going to use our rudder and our nose wheel steering to keep us aligned on the center line. And with that, let's take off. So throttles to full afterburner, so all the way forward. And the Hornet's going to get up to speed pretty quickly. There's 80 knots, 100, 120, 130, 140. Pulling back on the stick lightly, and we're airborne. Positive rate, so we're going to bring our gear up. And above 250 knots, we're going to bring our flaps back to auto. And we can roll our throttles back to about mil power or whatever we need, and we can go fly around. So that's how you taxi and take off in the Hornet. It's actually really easy. The Hornet is a very easy flying jet, and we'll get into some of the flying dynamics and general flying tips in the next video. So hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Take care.